So yesterday we read about the whooping cranes and we read about how their population almost died out, almost went extinct. That means no more whooping cranes. But scientists, um, through the years, right, the population was able to grow because they kept the land safe where they lived. But then scientists wanted to make sure there was more whooping crane populations in other places. So they came up with this plan to create a second flock or like a second group of these birds called the whooping cranes. And it was really interesting because in order to do this, they had to do it without the whooping crane, the little baby birds, had to do it without their parents. Because otherwise, the parents would just fly back to the same place. But they wanted these birds to live in a different area. So the humans, the scientists, actually became the parents, right? So we read yesterday how like they did the puppet arms and then they did the practice with the flying so that they could help them learn to go to another area. So they would actually live there as well. We could have a different group of whooping cranes in a different part of the country. So this was their plan, right? So they train them from the time they're young. They train them on what to do and how to fly. And today they're going to take off. Page 178, Operation Migration. If you have no clue where page 178 is, that's because you need to pause the video and you need to open up Whooping Cranes Part 2. So Whooping Cranes Part 2. So go ahead, pause and open, and we can resume. All right, so Operation Migration. Operation, that's 4 sounds. Operation Migration. Okay. All right, so here we go. Finally, the big day came. This experiment started with 11 eggs. 2 chicks had gotten sick and died. Okay. So 2 were sick and died, so now they're left with 11 minus 2 equals 9. 1 couldn't fly well and moved to a zoo. 9 minus 1 equals 8. They're left with 8. The other 8 whoppers were ready to go. 2 ultralights revved their engines. Vroom, vroom, vroom. That's what revved means. 1 would lead the birds. The other would track down cranes that strayed from the flock. That means they would go away from where the plane was. Okay. The planes took off. The birds did too. They were on their way. Planes and birds were only part of the migration. A crew drove south too. The birds had to eat and rest each night. Scientists had chosen safe places along the way. The crew rushed ahead to set up pens for them to stay in. Okay, so basically, these birds are going to do what's called migrate. They go from one area to another. Migrate is when you move from one area to another. That's migrate. So that's what the birds are doing. So they're going to have one plane that will lead the birds where to migrate, one plane that's going to come, and if a bird goes off, it'll help the bird come back. But can they do the trip in one night? No, it's too far. So what they do, they travel during the day, and then at night they come down and they rest. And there's cars on the grounds of other scientists that have come with them, and they have built like a pen, like a safe area for the birds to stay in each night. And then the next day, plane goes up, migrates a little bit more, stops for the night, down they go into the pen or the safe place. So they have to do this. Planes and birds were only part of the migration. Oh, we already read that page. All right, page 179. The trip was easy. And no, the trip was hard. The cranes flew up to 95 miles on good days. That's really far. Only 20 on bad days. or on bad ones. Often rain or wind kept them from flying at all. One sad night, oh no, it already said sad night. I think one of the birds will die. A giant storm ripped their pen apart. Caretakers spent hours searching and calling for their whoopers. Oh, okay, all were fine except one. Aw, he had flown into a power line and died. That's sad. Okay, so we had 8. 8 minus 1 equals 7. So now we only have 7. After 48 days, the plane flew over the bird's winter home in Florida. A caretaker on the ground played the whooping crane call. The whoopers swooped in for a landing. The first part of the journey was a success. So this is cool. If I need to better understand the migration, I can look at this text feature of the map. The map is a text feature, and it shows me where they went from Wisconsin all the way down to Florida. Wow, that's a really long ways away, actually. I'm trying to think if I were to drive that. That'd have to definitely be over 20 hours, even if you were just to drive that. It'd have to be over a day's worth of driving at the very least, if not more. That's a really long ways away. Next page, 180. A warm winter. What was one of the first things the whoopers learned about Florida? Ooh, crabs are delicious. Who agrees crabs are delicious? Who's like the whooper cranes? Actually, not me. Mr. Bond, but not me. The shells were hard, but the meat was soft. Puppet parents helped the whoopers learn to peck them apart, like peck. At first, the cranes stayed in a pen as big as a football field. Okay, this kind of football is like, whoo, American football. That's what they're thinking. Have you ever played that in PE? I don't know, the ball is kind of like a sphere shape. Kind of hard to describe the football. Anyway, but you go, you throw it like that. You can maybe just picture our school's big soccer field. Okay, just imagine that distance. That's about how big their area was, like their pen. It even had a pond with a fake whooper parent in it to make them feel safe. Actually, they were safer in the pond. Cranes usually sleep in the water at night. Wow, that's interesting. Splashing sounds warn them if a predator is nearby. Okay, predator. Do you see that word predator? I don't think a predator is a good thing. I think a predator is maybe like an animal that wants to eat the whooping crane. Okay, so maybe that's why they sleep, because then they can hear that water. In time, caretakers took the top off the pen. The cranes flew out to explore more of their new home. Caretakers hid, watching them enjoy yummy shrimp and snails. Okay, who likes shrimp? Not Mrs. Bond. Well, sort of. It depends. Who likes snails? Nah, not Mrs. Bond again. Generally, the whoopers returned to the pen at night. Sometimes they didn't. 2 cranes were killed by bobcats. Bobcats are a type of cat, and they're in the cat family, but they're bigger than like a house cat. Ooh, now there were 7 minus 2, 5. In spring, the birds started eating more. That was a good sign. They were storing energy for a trip north. Okay, so they're going to be going back north for the summer. Still, the scientists wondered, would the cranes know when to leave? Would they know on their own? Homeward bound? One day, caretakers heard radio signals. The cranes had leg bands that sent out these sounds. The whoopers were on the move. Caretakers jumped in 2 trucks to follow the signals. They had to hurry. The trip home would be much faster. Air has currents just like water does, can carry you. Birds ride these currents the same way that surfers ride waves. The cranes traveled more than 200 miles the very first day. Wow, that's amazing. So it seems like it's easier to fly up north. They were headed north, but would they remember their route? A route is like the path they take. Would they remember to go from Florida to Wisconsin? Soon, scientists had another thing to worry about. One crane left the group. Ooh, so that means only four. A truck turned to track her. Where was she going and why? What do you guys think? So there was five. One went away on its own. Where do you think it went? Interesting. 182. Day by day, the cranes kept flying. Then the group of four reached Lake Michigan. They began to circle. Oh no, thought the trackers. They do not know which way to go. The whoopers kept circling around and around. After 2 hours, they finally turned west. They were on course, so they're back on path. 11 days after leaving Florida, these four cranes came in for a landing. They were very close to the pen they grew up in. What about that last crane? She ended up visiting a flock of sandhill cranes for a while. Sandhill cranes are relatives of whooping cranes, so they're in the same family. 2 weeks later, she came back home to the refuge. That's pretty amazing. She knew how to come back on her own. Wow, pretty interesting. A new beginning. This first migration was finished, but the whooping crane's recovery had just begun. The next year, these 5 cranes flew south by themselves. The ultralights were busy leading 16 new chicks. Wow. The planes still led migrations each fall, but now whooping crane parents are leading their own chicks down south. That's really good. Some of these chicks have grown up enough to have babies of their own. The whooping crane is still threatened. It remains one of America's most endangered birds. But scientists are hopeful. Luckily, the flock keeps getting bigger. Wow. After you read this, you need to go to Class Dojo Portfolio and you have a write about reading response. Your write about reading needs to be how many sentences? Yeah, 5 sentences. When you do your 5 sentences, anytime you write about something, it's always good to have a topic sentence and a closing sentence. So I know sometimes like we just do that in writing with the paragraph of the week, but actually putting a topic and closing sentence, that's actually good in many other subject areas when you write. So that's something we want to keep practicing as well. So you can go to Class Dojo Portfolio and you can do the write about reading response.